The following program is a podcast1.com production.
From Hollywood, California, by way of the Broken Skull Ranch, this is the Steve Austin Show.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Now, here's Steve Austin.
Hell, is hit the record button. I'm sitting here with Pat Miletich, UFC Hall of Famer.
That means I'm old.
Well, you're sitting across the table from a WWE Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
God dang. Hey, man, we're just sitting here talking, and God dang. Well, let's talk about your podcast real quick. The Conspiracy Farm. How long you been doing this? Because I just listened to episode number 30, which you recommended to me. The Conspiracy Farm, former Spetsnaz Sonny Pazikas.
Yeah.
Talking about organ harvesting, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Hardcore stuff. You know, there's the idea behind the Conspiracy Farm is, you know, for me, I would sit there and I'd watch the news even as a kid, and I'd go, man, this just something about this doesn't sit right with me, you know. And I think in 1971 was the first time I started looking at life differently, because the Nixon took us off the gold standard, right? Put us on the petrodollar. That's when the farming collapse happened also back in that time, and all the farmers were lined up for blocks and blocks and blocks in a small town in southern Iowa called Albia, Iowa, where my family had a farm. And my grandma and my mom and I are standing in line to get into the bank so my grandma can withdraw her money. And luckily, we were one of the first ones in line. She actually got, I believe, most of her money out of that particular bank. And I sat there and I thought, you know, what the hell is going on? Why is this happening? Things like that. So I think from that point on, I started looking at really, truly what was going on and the things that are going on and who's funding terrorists, who's doing so many bad things. You know, people need to research it and just don't take the news for granted. Let's put it that way.
Well, let's go back a little bit, because if you're going back to the time you just mentioned, what were you, 7, 8 years old, and you were already thinking that shit?
I think I was 5.
5, okay.
5. Yeah. I mean, I watched the news with my parents when I was growing up. I got into it, right? And that's.
You understood everything that was going on?
Not necessarily understood it, but I was asking questions that early, and that's why I think I've just always been a truth seeker. You know, I became a Mason. Michael Chavello's a Mason also, a brilliant mind. The guy's got a brilliant mind.
What does that mean, a Freemason?
You know, you could ask 10 Masons what being a Mason is, and they could give you 10 different answers, and they'd all be correct. So for me, the history of being a Freemason is what was cool, because the Freemasons were part of the French Revolution, the American Revolution, all these types of things where the crown and the church were oppressing the people, and the Masons are like, you know, God smiles on all of us, not just God doesn't create the crown, right? See what I'm saying? So that's what really drew me in, was studying Freemasonry, its history, the important people, you know, the Alamo, the battle at the Alamo. You know, a lot of those guys, Daniel Boone and those guys were Masons, right? They knew they were going to die, but they did it out of principle.
Well, man, what kind of student were you coming up in high school and all that stuff? Because, man, just by listening to you and listening to your podcast and hearing you talk, and then listen to some of your fight strategy and your psychology, you sound like a rocket scientist. Was school easy for you?
School for me was boring. I hated school. I literally hated school, because I think it's men don't learn, boys don't learn the way girls learn, right? We should have our hands on things, learning, tinkering with stuff, building stuff, things like that. You put a boy at a desk all day, it doesn't work. It certainly didn't work for me. Let's put it that way.
Right. but certainly there has to be some educational process, although it seems to be kind of going to hell in a handbasket.
Education, to me, a lot of it's indoctrination. You know what I mean? There's a lot of brilliant people who never went to college. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a lot of millionaires never went to college. Just hard workers and figured things out. You know, it's the old saying, book smart, sidewalk dumb, right? A lot of those people. All
the years of fighting, which I want to get into, going back to when you probably started wrestling about 6, going through your high school career, where you shared the team with Mark Kerr.
Yeah.
So, man, what decided you, kicking back about a year and a half ago, did you say, hey, man, I'm going to start a podcast?
I just got frustrated, to be honest with you. I got frustrated with...
You want a platform, a voice?
Well, I wanted to at least use that to express what I believe is the truth in my research and things I've done. And, you know, one of the people that I run with, he's a John Deere exec, and he goes, you know, when you were talking on your podcast and you were saying the American public doesn't have time to research this stuff. Look, I'm in hotel rooms constantly, right, getting ready for shows, so I do have time to research things, and I can look things up, and I can talk to people. Luckily, because I've trained law enforcement and military, I know intel people, I know some very high-up people who will sit there and talk to me, you know. And so for me, he basically said, you know, I'm one of those people who doesn't have time. I get up early, go to work, pick the kids up from school, take them to practice, come home, we eat dinner, we go to bed, and it's just that nonstop American life where people don't have time to study it, research for themselves. They have to sit there and watch the news and go and take it as the truth when a lot of it's not.
Yeah, but man, I tell you what, I try to stay up as much as I can with everything, or the current situation, everything that's going on.
Right.
But man, to me, it just seems like there's so many people that are not only misinformed but completely uninformed because they don't give a shit, and they're just living life going, hey man, everything's cool for me, so I'm just going to go about and do my thing.
Right. Well, people need to be informed. Just for the fact is, I don't see a D or an R behind politicians' names anymore. Look, you're either in the globalist pocket or you're not. You're either for the Constitution, for individual rights, for the citizens and your fellow citizens, or you're not. You're allowing corporations and banks and things like that.
And that would be the globalist pocket.
Right,
because
right.
That's one of the things that you were talking about in this podcast that you recommended, episode 30.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for me, I don't even know if we talked about it in that podcast, but when you look at pictures from 4 and 5 years ago of John McCain meeting with the free, quote, Airfinger, quote, Free Syrian Army, the eventual leader of ISIS is sitting in the same room in the meeting, Baghdadi. He's sitting there with him, talking to him. And I sit there and I go, it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was, I called a good friend of mine who's an Intel guy, former Intel guy. I go, we're funding ISIS, aren't we? And he goes, absolutely, yeah. We're taking down Assad because he won't use the American dollar. It's that simple. And you just sit there and you go, what are we doing, man? They're butchering people, right? They're burning people alive. They're harvesting organs out of children. This stuff is some evil stuff, and it's just people need to pull their head out of the sand and realize what's going on.
What do you drop, one podcast a week?
Yeah.
Okay, it drops when?
We usually film it or record it on Tuesdays, usually.
Okay, it drops when?
We just throw it out. We're both busy. He does the recording, he edits it, he throws it out. My partner, Jeffrey Wilson.
And how'd you guys hook up?
He's originally from Davenport. He lives in St. Louis. He's a voiceover actor and has done some acting also. So he's got a great voice. He's got a great mind. He's very sharp. I'd say he's 100 times sharper than I am, quite frankly. But so we just, it made sense to us. It made sense to us. And, the cool thing is we're both from pretty diverse backgrounds. He's a black guy. I'm a white guy. We've lived different lives. Brother's a Marine, so we gel really well. And people can't poke holes in our game because we're pretty diverse.
How do you guys go about deciding what you're going to talk about?
Sometimes the stuff that's going on currently, we have to talk about, right? It's the hot thing. It's whatever, the things that we see through, whatever. But then, we'll say, hey, let's talk to a guy who's an expert in the human body, right? On health, on nutrition, things like that, to educate people on genetically modified foods and all the chemicals in our food, things like that. So it's just kind of, we'll just bounce ideas off each other and then just talk about it.
You were talking about genetically modified foods prior to me hitting the record button, and on another podcast I was listening to you talk to a guy from Australia about GMO foods and how they were messing with you so bad.
Right. The glutens in foods, the soy and the wheat I can't eat. And most people are actually allergic to it. They just don't realize it. It's just in different. Before it was bulletproof. You know how we were when we were young. We could walk through a wall. If we wanted to go through a wall, we were going to do it, right? We're pretty hard-headed. Yeah. And as I got older, my body started falling apart, and I thought, this is just from all the abuse, the fighting that I've done, the wrestling, the football. You've taken tons of injuries in pro wrestling and all the stuff that you've done. And I just said, I guess this is the way I'm going to have to live life. And I got to the point where I was ready to start eating really powerful painkillers. And a buddy of mine goes, let me do blood tests.
What kind of painkillers?
Whatever they were going to give me.
How many were you eating?
Well, I just started. I had just started. A guy just gave me some.
And this is recently?
Well, a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to.
This wasn't back in the day when you were fighting?
No.
Okay.
And, I mean...
So, dude, you had to be in some pretty good pain. Just say, hey, man, give us painkillers.
For over a decade, I was in horrible pain, and I finally it was breaking me down. I would get off a plane and have to connect on another flight, and I'd walk 5 gates and have to sit down because I was in so much pain. My back, my SI joints, everything. My joints were just... I would sweat profusely. I'd be soaked with sweat from pain, just nonstop pain. And, it's not fair to my wife. It wasn't fair to my kids. You're in a bad mood. Pain causes,
Dude, when you're in pain long enough, you can be in a real shit mood.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was causing me a lot of problems. And finally, a good friend of mine, luckily, probably honestly saved my life, goes, let me do blood tests on you. Let me see what I can do for you. Okay. Let's find out what's going on. We'll do blood tests. 2 weeks later, he got the results back and he goes, come on in. And he had me sit down and he goes, I'll tell you what's wrong with you. You tell me if I'm right. He goes, you're in massive amounts of pain all the time. I said, yeah. He goes, you've got 3 forms of arthritis. He goes, your gut is destroyed right now. You've got so much bad bacteria in your gut. It's affecting your thinking. Your temper's probably horrible, isn't it? I said, yeah. He goes, you're not thinking straight anymore. He goes, you're messed up in the brain because, he goes, you're a volatile human being because of the way you think, because of the chemicals from your gut. He goes, how's your breathing? I said, I feel like I've had asthma for 10 years. He goes, yeah, it's destroying your lungs too. He goes, last step of this process is going to be you having heart disease and being dead. He goes, so quit eating it or you're going to the grave quick. And so I stopped. A week later, my arthritis was gone. The running group, who probably helped save me just as much, I had a friend who was doing the Leadville 100. Amazing guys. This whole group is just the coolest group of people I could have ever found. And started training with them. They took me from running 3 miles to my long run of 75 miles in 10 months, literally. And that was a combination of hanging out with them and not eating bad food, processed foods.
Now, what is the Leadville 100?
The Leadville 100 is in Leadville, Colorado. It's the highest incorporated city in the United States. It's 10,200 feet. That's the starting line, 2 miles up.
That's the starting line?
Yeah. You start in Leadville and you go out 50 miles. You got to go through the San Isabel Forest, across the face of Mount Massive and Mount Elbert, the 2 tallest mountains in Colorado. Then you go over Hope Pass, which is almost 13,000 feet. Get down to the other side.
You owe me a beer, Pat. That was Pat's phone. That's the protocol for the Steve Austin show. That's the bottom line because I said so. Talking to a UFC Hall of Famer.
And you go over Hope Pass. You get down to the other side at the 50-mile mark, and you turn around and you come back and do it all over again. And it's I failed last year. I fell, injured my knee and my calf. And
at what mark?
I did it at 8 miles into the son of a... and I made it to the 13.5-mile cutoff, and then I made it to the 24-mile cutoff, and they kicked me out because I looked like I was a horse ready for the glue factory. So, yeah, so I'm going back. I'm doing it again this year.
Why?
It's amazing. It's the coolest sporting event I've ever seen. I've seen some really cool sporting events in my day, been in some pretty cool sporting events. There's nothing more challenging that I could think of to do. And to watch people actually do this thing and fall apart and then get it back together. I mean, one of the guys that was running last year, John Burns, his name, he's a professor at a local college where I live. An incredible guy, used to train martial arts with me. At the 50-mile mark, he had no idea what was going on. He had he was dehydrated. He had caloric probably deficit, the altitude sickness. He had everything. Yeah. He was clueless about what was going on. He could barely even function at all. And they were getting ready to pull him out of the race. And I said, John, I go, you come with me. Let's go over here. Your fluids and all this other stuff to change out are over here, and we'll get you going back. At the 50-mile mark, you got somebody to go with you now. One of your pacers can go with you and talk to you and keep you company, right? So he's getting ready, and you're looking back at the mountain to go over. And I'm telling you, it's an intimidating sight. And he goes, okay. So I told Jeremy, his pacer, I go, get him out of here, man. Get him moving, or he's not gonna make it. They're gonna kick him out of the race. And he did it. And at the 60-mile mark, after he had gone back over that mountain, back to Twin Lakes, Colorado, so he's at mile 60 now, comes in there by himself. He had smoked the pacer who went with him, who was fresh. Got over the mountain and back down the mountain, came running into town, sat down, changed his shoes, and I look at him, I go, John. And he goes, yeah. And I go, you're back. He goes, I'm back, baby. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen to somebody come back from that, right? And so it's just a constant battle. It's such a mental battle that you can see out there with these people.
As we would say in the pro wrestling business, he fired up a comeback.
Yeah.
Hey, so you're, according to what I listen to, you're a self-described adrenaline junkie.
Yeah, I am.
And
I love
so
it.
You need these challenges.
I do.
Would you go ballistic if you didn't have this outlet or some way to challenge yourself?
I have to put myself under stress. I think I have to. Yeah. I mean, running with these guys, Steve, you can't imagine what these guys
No, I can't imagine because, man, I went to Colorado a couple of times, went skiing, blew up because of the high altitude, and right. That's not my cup of tea.
Right.
So when you're in Iowa, well, how often are you in Iowa? Because you just said you're traveling 180 days out of the year. What are you busy doing so much?
Well, I'm doing commentary, training law enforcement, military, all that sort of stuff.
And you go from place to place?
Yeah. And, the bad thing is the good thing about living in Iowa is there's no traffic. There's, it's not crowded like it is out here, or major cities. I don't do well in major cities, actually.
No, I got a couple text messages. You were flabbergasted, to say the least, about the L.A. traffic
Every
situation.
time I come out here, I freak out, right?
I live here and I'm freaked out.
Yeah, so I just
get behind a Prius driver with a cigarette hanging out the damn window. That'd really bug you. And then when the red light turns green and he's still sitting there sending a text message,
right?
Yeah, that'll grind my okay. So go ahead.
No, but the running, I think, I'm telling you, these guys.
Dude, but aren't your knees beat up from all the damn wrestling takedowns and all the stuff that you've been through?
My knees feel better than they ever have. It was all, like I said, the gluten, the inflammation, right? But on a 50-mile run we did last year, it was 95 degrees out, 95% humidity, and I fell apart. I mean, I fell apart bad. I was heat stroking probably for 4 hours of it, and they were laughing at me. My friend John Byrne looks at me and he goes, "How you doing, buddy?" And I look at him and I go, "John, I'm not going to die today." Right? That's all I remember saying to him is, "I'm not going to die." And the two guys running in front of us, Rick Fountain and John O'Brien and Kurt, and also Kurt, who's a banker, are just laughing their asses off at me. It was like being back in the fight business. Guys, you get hurt or get dropped by a body shot or something, and everybody's high-fiving each other and laughing at you. It's the same mentality. Man,
I was watching a video of Mark Kerr, and he was talking about, and this was interesting because the video was done probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And when I watched The Smashing Machine years ago,
right?
And this is a guy you went to school with.
Yeah, he was a freshman when I was a senior,
right?
And I remember all the upperclassmen, the wrestlers, used to pick on him constantly, just beat his ass in the room. Yeah, I came from Bettendorf, Iowa. That's where I'm born and raised. Still live there. It's probably the number one wrestling city in Iowa, which is a wrestling state, right? But Bettendorf's won a ton of state championships. Just always number one in the state generally growing up. And so to have a room full of just beasts, for high schoolers who kick 99% of the men's asses across the country, right? These are a bunch of rough kids. They used to just brutalize him. And I'd always tell him, quit picking on that kid, man. He's a nice kid, leave him alone. And then I lost touch with him. He went to Syracuse, wrestled. And then I saw he was fighting, and I was like, holy shit, this guy's huge now. Look at him. I'm glad I was nice to him when I was in high school. But Mark was a nice guy, and he went through some really tough times, man. He really did with the painkillers and all the other stuff. He really had a rough road.
Well, man, he got spun up on the PEDs along with painkillers, and then some party stuff on top of that.
Right.
So, to see him do these interviews, man, I thought the guy... going from the track record of pro wrestling, a lot of the guys meet their demise because, man, they're burning the candle at about 3 or 4 ends.
Absolutely.
So he was burning it pretty hot. I did the guy still be around. And to watch him do this interview, he was in a real coherent state and reflective. It seemed like he's matured a lot. Maybe he was a little out there to begin with. I don't know. But, I was glad to see that he was still alive and seemingly doing very well because I didn't think he'd make it this far.
Right. And
watching that Smashing Machine.
Yeah, and in the sport of MMA, the business of pro wrestling, all that stuff, you guys are getting hurt constantly. We're getting hurt constantly. Everybody's always in pain. You guys travel even way more than we ever even thought of traveling. And doing shows constantly all over I don't know how any of you guys survive, period, because you guys take way more of a beating than any guy in MMA, trust me. I just know it. Yeah,
but the grind you guys are going through, because I was watching some of your stuff. Jesus, it was the Miletich Fighting System documentary on YouTube. I was watching, a lot of that stuff, and you guys are so close and doing stuff together, hanging out together with the business stuff, and I'm assuming, to a degree, MMA. But you guys, as far as the professional athlete, it's a little bit different standard, I think, from a performance standpoint. You got to be spot on if you're going to get in that cage.
Well, and you lose, you only get half the money that you're planning on getting.
A lot of motivation there. But with the pro wrestling thing, there's a lot of rock and roll to the pro wrestling business,
right?
And you can get caught up on that. Does that exist? Or is it prevalent in the world of MMA?
As far as like partying and all that sort of stuff?
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, guys, most guys live pretty clean lives, but after they're done fighting, they'll go out and drink and have fun and get crazy. And, I would liken it to fighters getting done with a fight and going out drinking is like an aircraft carrier or a submarine pulling in after 3 months in the ocean and turning all the friggin' Marines loose on a city.
Right.
You know what I mean? In port. It's there's friggin' military police all over the place to keep a leash on these animals because they've been out at sea for so long. So it's the same thing with fighters. 3-month camp, 2.5-month camp, living clean, focused on what you're doing, and you win a big fight, get a big payday, go out and celebrate. Yeah, fighters can get kind of crazy.
Are you still training fighters?
For the most part, I don't. I just don't.
When did you stop?
It's been several years, to be honest with you. I mean, my goal was to win a world title for myself, definitely. Train a bunch of guys, try and get a bunch of world titles for a bunch of people. To have affiliate schools all over the country. I had like 60-some affiliate schools, and it just got to be too much. I mean, I was working at 3 TV networks for ESPN, Showtime Sports, and Access TV, and now I'm full-time with Access. I had a gym. I was coaching fighters, had law enforcement and military training company. All this stuff was going on. And it got so out of control that I wasn't seeing my kids. And it was when I was really under a lot of pressure. It was the last show I did of the year before the holidays, before Christmas, when we go to Florida and relax, the family, for 2 weeks. We just go down there and sit and hang out. And I did the show with Brian Stan, who's a Marine Corps, badass, great guy, great human being. He got in the car service was taking us back to the airport. And he looked at me. And I was on the phone with my daughters on speakerphone, and they were much younger then. And I said, I love you. I'm looking forward to making breakfast for you guys in the morning and stuff. I'll get back when you're in bed, but, I'm really looking forward to it. And Brian Stan looks at me just out of the blue, and he goes, Pat, he goes, I've killed a lot of people. And he goes, and every time in the middle of a firefight, bullets bouncing off Hesque or rocks around me, all that sort of stuff, explosions going off. He goes, I always wondered what life was all about. And he goes, if I finally came to the conclusion that life is about, for a man, raising his kids the right way and spending time with them. And I went, that's it. I'm done. I'm retired. I didn't say that to him. I literally looked out the window of the car and I just went, I just retired.
But you got it.
That moment I was done coaching. I went back home and went to the gym, and I told everybody, I said, I'm done. Find a new coach. That's it. It's over.
And you were able to walk away and not look back and not miss
I don't regret it. No,
because Mark Kerr still misses it.
I don't miss fighting. I don't miss coaching. I don't miss any of it. I love what I do now. I love the commentary. I love trying to educate the fans of what's going on in a fight. I love seeing new talent rising up. Access TV finding all these kids. You know what I mean? So that excites me. It does.
One thing about Brian Stan, I believe it was his last fight. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was Vanderlei Silva. And they went out there and they were just slugging it out.
Yeah.
And, I would have thought Brian would not have engaged him like that, but he did. And I think he got clipped. And was it a TKO?
Yeah, he ended up
But
getting
God dang, what a valiant effort. Man, that showed a ton of heart. And, of course, a Marine badass. And, I mean, he's like red, white, and blue. There's nothing that you cannot like about the guy. Looks like an action figure. Good-looking guy.
Yeah.
Great on commentary.
Yeah.
But, man, that last fight, I was impressed with him to begin with. But to go out like that, in that kind of a fight, it was pretty badass.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, I was screaming at the TV, actually. I know Vanderlei and I get along pretty well. I really love Brian Stan, and I was sitting there screaming at the TV going, take him down, quit being a Marine, and just go out, shoot a double leg and take him down and quit getting blasted in the head. And, I think the Marine came out in him in that one. It was a brutal fight. It was a rough one.
Man, I've always wondered about me coming from a pro wrestling standpoint. We spend a lot of time in airports, on roads, in the cars, in tour buses, stuff like that. We don't really have a training camp. We'll fly into a hub, let's say Chicago. You can get your rent a car there. Some of these guys these days are using tour buses. That was before my time. So you jump in, you rent a car, and then, maybe you hooked up with a bunch of people if you're a top guy, and you're kind of a lone wolf McQuaid like myself. I traveled with the boys back in the day because we didn't have no money. You start making a little bit of money, you start traveling by yourself.
Right.
But, we might hit 3, 4, 5, 6 towns. We might have a drop car. We might go back to Chicago and then fly to another place.
Okay.
So we ain't got no training camp. We know where the United States is a big loop.
Right.
We've been there a million times to each town.
Yeah.
So you know where all the gyms are. You know where the Denny's, the IHOPs, the Waffle House is, so you can get some clean food.
Yeah.
Because you can eat clean wherever you go.
Right.
It's just your choice.
Yeah.
But we go to the gym, you get your cardio. These guys are still tan. I stay away from the UVA, UVB rays. But back in the day, I stayed tan because if not, I looked like a big, just bald-headed white guy that was super white.
So white you were transparent?
Yeah, I needed to look cool to be beating everybody's ass. But my point is, we didn't have training camps to get ready for a big fight. I would just love to know what the fight camp is all about, because I was watching, I think it was Tim Sylvia was talking, it might have been Matt Hughes, the first session, second session. How many hours a day did you train or have your guys train when you're getting them ready? And it's a 3-month camp for a big-ass fight.
Right. Usually it was 2 to 3 hours in the morning and 2 to 3 hours at night. And I always did my cardio. A lot of times I would lay in bed, and to give you an idea, Mondays would be more striking and takedown type stuff.
Okay.
Tuesdays was strictly grappling. Wednesdays was just sparring, stand up, and Wednesday was, kick the out of each other night. That was everybody. Every morning I woke up on a Wednesday for 20 years. I was a huge grin on my face because I loved Wednesdays. I just loved it. Thursdays was grappling, wrestling stuff. Fridays was usually conditioning type stuff, more conditioning. And Saturday was a light conditioning, sparring, and then Sunday off type stuff. So, and I would lay in bed and panic. I would panic about what my opponent was doing. I'd get up at midnight and go for a run. Things like that, just because I couldn't let the other guy outwork me, things like that. Right. That had to be the mentality going into a fight, because I ran out of gas in my first kickboxing match as an amateur even in Chicago. I hit a guy with a spinning back fist, and I broke my right forearm. I snapped it on his forehead. Instead of hitting him on the jaw, I hit him on the forehead, snapped my forearm, right? So I had to finish the fight exhausted, and it sucked. I ran out of gas. I was panicked, everything else. So I swore to myself that was never going to happen again. So everything had to be based on, no matter what, I'm never going to have the excuse I'm going to lose because I'm tired. I never want to lose a fight because I ran out of gas, because that's all on you, right?
Damn right.
You can never run out of gas in a fight. It just can't happen.
Well, here's the thing. When you're a pro wrestler, if you're on top or if you're on the card, man, those people come in there to see a badass pro wrestling match.
Right.
So if you blow up, or gas, as we call it, blowing up in the business, if you blow up, I mean, all of a sudden, if you're shining the guy up, you're working heel, he's baby, you're shining him up. Then in the heat, when it's time for you to get your shit in and torture this guy, you're laying in a rear chin lock because you can't breathe. They didn't pay to sit there and watch you lay in a rear chin lock 5 minutes.
Right.
They want to beat his ass, and then you got to flip-flop and fly for that comeback.
Yeah.
But when you're gassed to the gills and blowing up, you cannot do that. So was that the only fight that you ever blew up in? Pretty much,
yeah. I mean, and I goofed around a little bit with pro wrestling. Me and some of the fighters used to horse around. It's just tiring.
It is.
It's tiring, man.
But here's the thing. A lot of times the guys walk out in front of a crowd, and these days every single WrestleMania is in an arena. So they're playing to 70,000
massive crowds,
plus crowds. Back in the day we were doing WrestleManias playing in front of 20s, and then we started getting to the 60s, 70s.
Right.
But my point is, big fight, everything spun up. I've seen guys walk to the ring and get there and be gassed.
Yeah.
Because of nerves.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you were talking about, people coming out of, whether it's your camp or anybody else's camp, achieving great things for themselves. And that's great if they can do that.
Right.
But, going out there and fighting in front of a couple thousand, whether these days from the UFC, whatever,
big crowds,
20,000, 30,000, or as many as you can get in the building,
right.
And on a pay-per-view with astounding numbers that they're doing, you see guys go out there with that same mental makeup and blow up because of a crowd, or get gassed because the moment is too big for them?
I think they get gassed a lot of times because they're not prepared to, right? That's the thing. My mentality was make the training far harder than any fight could ever be. It had to be so torturous that people would just fold up and go home and never come back. We had people come from all over the country, all over the world, show up for a 6-week camp and leave in 2 or 3 days and go, this is an insanity.
Yeah.
We can't, this is insane. The room is 98 degrees in this wrestling room. Do you always keep the heat up like this? I go, yes, that's the way it always is. That's the way we're going to get you in shape, right? You just got to get used to the misery. And plus, every guy that you grabbed at one time, I had 40 or 50 guys that were ranked in the top 10 in the world, each of them. So no matter where you turned, every 5-minute go you had was with a badass who was trying to kill you. So when a guy would come who's maybe a really good fighter, but he didn't have that type of training, right, with that type of people, that many good bodies, they would gas out quick. And that's the difference, I think. It's the people you train with that put you under pressure. My name was on the building, and I got my ass kicked daily. That's the way it had to be, and I knew it. For a kid, I would say, if you're the best guy in your gym or one of the absolute best guys in your gym, you probably want to find a new gym.
I was listening to some of the guys that came out of your camp, high-level guys, world champions, and they were talking about how tough the grind was in the gym, and you just said torturous. So then when did you ever consider, hey, man, I could be, or these guys may be, as they would say in bodybuilding or maybe even powerlifting, overtraining? Does that ever come into play?
That's the thing is, at one time I had to learn that I was overtraining all the way up to a fight where we would back it down. We would taper for a good week to 10 days. So, and that was enough for a fight because you're a loaded spring by then. Your body's rested. You're ready to just jump out of the cage and go, man, smash stuff. So for me, and I used to have people come to my gym, and after they'd leave early, basically, we had a guy leave a letter, a 2 or 3 page letter, and Matt Hughes kept it. And it's him. He was a Penn State linebacker. He played football for Penn State. And the guys took it easy on him, and they wanted to film a reality show at my gym. So they sent this producer's son, who was a linebacker at Penn State, thinking he can go through the motions, film a little bit, kind of get an idea for what the show's going to be like. And he left. He was terrified, and he said we took his manhood from him, right? It freaked me out. I kind of felt bad for the guy, but I've had other people go, you were nothing but an asshole to people. And I go, look, here, let me explain something to you, okay? This is a serious business. People get butchered in this sport. People get chewed up and spit out. I went to, as a guest in Chicago, they had me go to a kickboxing event in Chicago. And there was a kid fighting that shouldn't have been fighting. He didn't know what he was doing. He was out of shape, and he died in the ring. He had a heart attack in the ring, and he died. He was in his early 20s, right? The referee is on top of him, trying to hitting chest compressions on him. And I jump up in there. There's no doctor. There's nobody around. There's no ambulance. There's nobody. And I get in there, and I shove the ref away from him. And I go, dude, you haven't even checked for a pulse. Stop it. So I pull the kid's mouthpiece out, and he turns his head toward me, and he's trying to listen to me when I'm talking to him, and then his eyes just go jet black. They dilate, right? And I go, and right then 2 volunteer firemen jumped in. I go, he just stopped. He stopped breathing. So I checked for a pulse. We started breathing for him, and he died in our hands. He turned purple in a matter of minutes. I mean, his heart literally blew up, Steve. And it freaked me out because I was the reigning UFC champ at the time. And I left that building, and I said, never will I have to explain to someone's parents, never will I have to explain to a fighter's parents why he got butchered in a fight or why he ran out of gas or something worse happened to him. So that's the way my mentality was. Everybody is going to either survive this horrible training or get the f*** out. You don't belong here. You don't belong in this sport. I don't want to see it. Just leave.
So what happened with the kid's death? I mean, was there a big lawsuit against the promotion to put on the fight? Or what?
I have no idea what actually transpired. I just knew that they had found something in his system where I think he had a shitload of caffeine or White Crosses or something that he had eaten. But he was overweight. He wasn't trained. He didn't know how to punch correctly. Everything. It was like a cocktail for disaster. And there's people out there that are doing this and putting kids in the ring who they just shouldn't be there. You know what I'm saying? It's one thing to learn for self-defense purposes, things like that. But if you're going to fight, you have got to be ready. I mean, you better be 100% ready.
Hey, man, I'm sitting there talking to Pat Miletich. He's got a podcast called Conspiracy Farm, and I'm coming right back after pause for calls. So sponsors keep the show on the air twice a week for free. 2 cans of audio whoop ass. Pat Miletich is my guest today. Coming back to talk about mindset entering the octagon. Hey, man, let's talk about pre-fight strategies. Man, I'm a huge UFC fan, as you know, and watch damn near every single pay-per-view. Man, I watch those cutaways to the locker room, guys getting warmed up, getting their hands taped up.
Right.
You're watching the fights back there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're watching the fights. And, for us, we always had – I mean, there was a time where I think we had 7 guys on one UFC. So our entire locker room was just all us. Yeah. It was us against the world. It was pretty cool.
Numbers.
It was great, and every guy gets 3 guys as cornermen. So my whole camp's there, right? Yeah. We're having a blast. And we did that for a lot of UFCs back then. And, we'd watch the fights, and no matter who was fighting, we're watching and talking and laughing and, doing whatever. What
was your mindset? You're a big fight, whether it's championship bout or not. I mean, every fight's a big fight.
Right.
Let's face it. So what was your mindset? I mean, were you a nervous kind of guy, or were you just total, Jedi mind trick guy?
I tried to, to be honest with you, I tried to think about the fight. I would always visualize getting out of bad situations, being in horrible situations, getting rocked with a punch, seeing stuff coming, getting out of the way, fighting a perfect fight. I'll go through all those scenarios in my brain. And I was a nervous wreck pretty much every fight, to be honest with you. Other guys weren't. When Matt Hughes fought Carlos Newton took the title from me. I made one stupid-ass mistake, and he caught me in a great choke, and I couldn't get out of it. Then Matt was fighting him, right? And I'm motivated. As a coach now, I'm motivated. I want my boy to get the world title back, right? We're going to bring that back to Iowa. And I said to Matt, Carlos came walking out with like some Penthouse Playmates or some shit. I don't know what it was. And he's dancing. He's got sunglasses on. He looks like Lenny Kravitz, doing his thing. And I go, Matt, basically you beat this son of a bitch's ass, and I'm yelling at him. And he goes, Pat. He goes, dude, everything's fine, man. He goes, well, we got this. Just chill out, dude. Relax, So I was even more of a wreck coaching a lot of times because I got to a point as I got older, too, as I started caring. There's maybe a little less testosterone, a little less crazy, and more of the person, where I start thinking about these guys. I love them, they're like little brothers. I don't want to see them get hurt, because you can see some guys get destroyed in fights, and, you don't want to see that. So you're really, before Matt fought Frank Trigg, and I was worried about that fight the first time they fought, I was having a meltdown in terms of just myself. I was so nervous for him that I had to lay on the locker room floor for an hour and just breathe and just relax, because I had massive anxiety about that fight.
When a round is over, you go to your corner or your area. They ain't really a corner.
Right.
So you go to your spot, a red or blue stool, whatever it's called. So it's a 1 minute break. All of a sudden, you got these coaches saying, well, this is before you're coaching. Hey, man, do this, blah, blah, blah. Watch this, throw the left,
right,
or whatever. How much of that can you actually understand, comprehend, and try to employ? Because sure enough, it's probably very sound advice. This is your camp, or this is you giving advice to another fighter.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, you want to try to employ this, but that other guy is doing this other shit that it's hard to employ the advice you've been given. So
right.
My point is, were you able to comprehend what your coaches were telling you, and the same with your fighters? How tough is it to make those mid-fight adjustments while the shit's going down?
I think half the time I was a shitty listener, and other times I would pay attention to stuff that at least clicked in my brain. Maybe like, hey, you need to start checking those low kicks. Your legs getting. I know my legs getting destroyed. It's killing me. What are you talking about? Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I'll check the kicks, right? But other times, I remember a Brazilian guy I was fighting had me in a choke, and the corner's screaming, "You got to get out of it! You got to get out of it!" And I'm looking at him, and he's not choking me. I was really good at defending those usually, and so I was blocking the choke. And I was just looking at my cornerman, and I'm going, relax, I'm not getting choked, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, there's been other times where I've cornered Matt Hughes again. He was fighting Carlos Newton for the second time in London. And the real famous, is it Royal Albert Hall or whatever it is over there, right?
Yeah.
Really cool place. I'm sure you probably performed there.
We wrestled there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a story for you. Go ahead.
Okay, so Hughes comes back after the first round, and he had just literally demolished Carlos Newton in one round. And I go, or maybe it was after the second round, but I got out of Matt's way so I could show him Carlos on the other side of the cage. And I go, look over there. I go, they're trying to put him back together right now, dude. It's over this round. You go out and wreck him. And so Royal Albert Hall is packed. I don't know how many people that place holds, but there's a lot of people there. And the place is so loud, screaming. Hughes has him in a crucifix. Trapped his arm with his legs.
A crucifix. I would not want to be in a crucifix or on a crucifix back in the day. When I see someone employ the crucifix, I'm like, Jesus.
And Hughes was the master of it.
No pun intended, yeah.
Hughes was the master of it. And if Hughes got you in that in practice, to get out of that, I'm telling you, man, it was an all-day process to get out of it. He was so strong.
I know.
Well, there's ways, like I used to have to do massive backward somersaults to come out and roll them, right? Stuff like that. And Matt was so good at trapping the arms that you were just stuck there. It's like having your arms tied behind your back and somebody elbowing you in the face, right? It's a helpless feeling, and it's a horrifying feeling, and I kid you not. And if you watch that fight, you might even be able to hear it. I've never watched it again, but I could hear Carlos Newton screaming like a schoolgirl while those elbows were raining down on his face over the sound of the entire crowd. He was freaking out. It was like he was being murdered on the spot.
We got a chance to wrestle in Royal Albert Hall one time. Maybe we were there a couple of times, but Big Man Vader. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
Big dude. Used to play football. He was close to 400 pounds. And Leon is his real name, Leon White. But he's a really, really nice guy. He could be a bully sometimes, but really a nice guy.
Yeah.
And he came back from doing something. I guess it was right after the match, but he was kind of still somewhat in character or persona. And he started tearing it up backstage, and it was either a desk or a chair. I think it was a chair, and he just smashes it to smithereens. Well, it turns out that everything in Royal Albert Hall is a very valuable antique.
Oh, jeez.
So I think it was like a it might have been even more, $1,000 chair or table or whatever he destroyed, but it was just one of those cool things that happened. It's like, man, that was stupid as shit. But it was cool to see it go down. For the most part, the guys in the business are pretty damn cool. But they're all, and there's some real badasses in the business. Right. Now, obviously, not with the kind of skills and the skill set that you guys have, but just as far as bar fights and stuff like that. I don't know if you've ever heard of Haku or Ming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy, had he been, a part of what you guys are doing way back in the day.
Would have done well.
Probably could have been a force to reckon with.
Yeah.
But we're going to share our share of tough guys. But one of the things that's interesting in our business is you can get some guys guys, and they're actively recruiting these people, former football players or, guys with a little bit of, from all sizes, but bigger guys, because right now there's plenty of smaller guys and medium-sized guys in the business. Vince always likes those bigger guys.
Right.
So former football players and some of these AAU wrestlers, these amateur wrestlers, they're 220 and up. And, man, these guys are monsters, as you know. They're specimens.
Right.
But sometimes, man, when it's interesting because you like Ken Shamrock. He started off in pro wrestling, then went to MMA, then came back to pro wrestling. So he had a grasp, right off the bat of what pro wrestling was, and he made the adaptation and was really, really cool. Yeah. And Ken was very dangerous in our business and the squares in the octagon as well. And Kurt Angle, gold medalist of '96, able to check all the ego, use the amateur wrestling and some chain wrestling, but not sugar anybody, tie anybody up, keep them down.
So were those guys like a Shamrock or an Angle or guys who had wrestled? Would they potato people more than other people?
You would think no, and especially not Kurt, because he wasn't throwing punches. His was always a working punch from way back here.
Okay, and
Shamrock now. Because I think he started from pro wrestling and went into shoot. I think he never – I mean, anybody can and does potato people, but as a habit, no.
Okay.
Never.
Yeah.
And, Ken was a guy, he could have a pretty hot temper.
Yeah.
And he was always super cool, man. I mean, that guy was, he never hurt anybody. And he always checked his ego at the door because seemingly, when the bell goes off, hey, man, if you don't like the finish – you can modify things and change them accordingly if you want to, then deal with the repercussions afterwards. But he never did that. He was a real team player.
Yeah. So you remember, have you ever seen the show American Pickers?
I like the show, but it's a little bit rigged, like everything on television is.
But so those,
other than my show.
I grew up with those guys, right?
Oh,
they're from my hometown.
Phenomenal.
Mike Wolf and I.
I got to hang with them because they get the great deals on everything they find.
Yeah. So Mike and I used to get in all kinds of trouble when we were younger, right?
Really?
Oh yeah. He was a tough guy. He was a scrapper. Really? He doesn't act like it on TV, of course, but he could fight, dude. He and I got in some scraps with people, and he was a good wrestler, right? He was a tough guy. And when we were kids, we were doing a pro wrestling match. We were just always doing this, right? And we're selling knees, right? Just friggin' blasting each other in the head with knees, and we do backflips and land and all this stuff. And he splattered my nose all over my face. That's one of my stories with him. He absolutely splattered my nose all over my face with a knee. That's one of my fond memories when we were doing it for all the neighborhood. We were doing matches for the kids in the neighborhood, right?
Well, as you can see, I got some porcelain signs over there from the 30s.
Did he get you those?
Do what?
Did he get you those?
No. But I mean, I'm a collector, so I'm an American Pickers fan.
Right.
But man, when you got a TV crew and you roll up on a bunch of good shit,
yeah.
There's a little bit of work to it, but the guy definitely knows his stuff.
He does.
And it's a real fun show. Are they even still on the air?
Oh yeah. They're on Discovery, dude. He scammed me so good. I found one of the old John Deere signs at an abandoned farm by my house where I grew up in Bettendorf, Iowa, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of the really long metal ones with the black and yellow and orange
exactly
colors, right?
Yeah.
With the deer going over the log. And I said to my buddy, I go, dude, we need to I want this. Let's carry this to my house. So we picked it up. It's an abandoned farm, so what the hell, right? So we carried it all the way back to my house, and it stayed in my room, my bedroom, till I was probably 19, 20. I'd already gone to college for a while. And he goes, hey, man, you want to sell that? And I thought, yeah, I'm kind of hard up for money. I need some beer money, whatever.
Jesus.
I sold it to him for like $100. Well, he sold it to a restaurant for, I think, $1,000 or something. And then that restaurant, I think, sold it to John Deere World Headquarters, which is right across the river from where I live, for probably $10,000. And they've got that thing now in John Deere World Headquarters.
And it's amazing, man. I went to a friend of mine just had a gasser sale just the other day, and man, I rolled out there with a couple G's in my pocket.
Yeah.
And man, I started looking around, and I'm very frugal, man.
Right.
I'm looking for a deal. And I kept my money in my pocket. I saw some stuff that I would have liked to have seen.
Yeah.
I just couldn't pull the trigger on anything. But, yeah, my point is, some of those signs, especially that one, especially if it's hanging up in John Deere's headquarters, for 10G, that's probably now a $30,000, $40,000 sign.
I wouldn't doubt
if
it.
not higher.
Right.
Hey, you brought up deer, and I was known for being big deer country.
Right.
Did you ever do any hunting, fishing, get out in the outdoors? I mean, were you scrapping all the time?
No, I was a fishing freak. That's what I did. I mean, pretty much had guns my whole life. I've hunted a little bit, but I just don't have time. You know what I mean? I don't even have time to go fishing. I'm going to go fishing on Father's Day with my kids. I'm really looking forward to that. But that's the thing. It's I don't have the time anymore. It's unfortunate. But when I was fighting, when I was single, I'd train in the morning, then I'd go fishing, I'd grab food, go fishing during the day, train at night, or sometimes fish all night. Like go catch a bunch of catfish, do whatever. But yeah, fishing's my first love. I love it. I love fishing for anything in the water.
What kind of fish y'all catching over there?
Bass, largemouth, smallmouth, catfish. There's northern pike in areas. I tell you what, though, my daughter caught an alligator gar when she was probably 6. Talk about a kid going, what in God's name is this thing? She pulls an alligator gar out of some backwaters and freaked out. But she's caught barracuda with me, all kinds of stuff, my 12-year-old. So,
hey, man, but that's cool that they're out there and enjoying the outdoors.
Yeah, well,
a lot of kids ain't.
Yeah, no, my kids are both competitive. My 2 oldest are competitive swimmers. Their swim coach, since they've been 5 or 6 years old, is a friend of mine. He's a former Navy SEAL. So you can imagine what that kid's program's like. I mean, he does not play games. He expects, and he goes, from the get-go when he started his team, we switched our kids over right away. I go, we're going to this team. That's who I want training my kids. I want them to have that mentality their whole life growing up, right? Just do it right or don't do it at all. And he even said to me, he goes, listen, I'm just going to let you know right now, Pat. He goes, this is not a parent-run team. He goes, I run this fucking team. So, if you have complaints, yeah, we can talk. But there's not a board of parents that, like the team you came from. I go, that's why we're coming here. I go, I know you and I are going to get in arguments, dude. I already know it. That's just the way he is and I am. But it's worked out well. I mean, my kids are hammers in the water, man. They, since, God, they've been, when they were like 7, 8 years old, they could swim 5 miles without stopping, literally. I mean, just keep going.
Yeah.
They're just hammers.
Yeah, but some of these parents get a little caught up in all the stuff, whether it's football, baseball, or whatever program it might be.
Parents ruin kids' sports constantly, man.
But they push the kids too hard. I mean, like, amen, support the kid, but then
right.
That's it, just support the kid. That's why I was always fortunate with my parents. Hey, they were highly supportive. If I had a great day running the football, hey, man, they'd tell me about it. If I had a shit day running the football, hey, man, got to get them next time.
Yeah.
But these people these days, they put too much pressure on the kids. I think that's bullshit.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing is my wife and I have talked about that. My wife was a really good figure skater. She grew up in Montreal. And
I wanted to ask you about her because her being from Canada, you being from Iowa, and an MMA fighter, how did y'all meet?
She came to Palmer Chiropractic College from Montreal. It's a very, very international school, right? So that's how we met. And, so it was exactly what you're saying. For me, we're there to hug the kids. That's all we're there to do, man. Pat them on the back and say, good job. If you did your best, look in the mirror. If you can say to yourself you did your best, that's all that matters. They can't go from a hostile environment with a coach yelling at them to a hostile environment at home and their parents are yelling at them. You just can't do it to them. They've got to have somewhere safe to go, right?
Hey, man, with all the years that you spent in the octagon, I know you're doing training for the Leadville 100.
Yep.
So if you weren't doing that, what would you be doing to stay busy, occupy time? Is fighting still in you? I mean, do you have to go hit a heavy bag? I mean, what would you do to stay in shape if you weren't doing the training for the Leadville 100?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I was searching for years, Steve, of something that would scare the shit out of me, really, to be honest with you. And the Leadville 100 scared the shit out of me. So, I'm afraid of heights.
I was fixing to ask you about jumping out with some parachutes.
I don't know if I do that, to be honest with you. I mean, like they say, if the plane's on fire, yeah, I'm going. But but I mean, I'm terrified of heights. I can't stand at a plate glass window 5 stories up and stand at the edge of it because I have that phobia on being pulled over the edge, right?
Right.
So the Iowa State Patrol, I've worked with some of those guys and trained them and stuff. They came to me and said, hey, every year we do a charity event for Special Olympics, and we want you to be the celebrity this year that rappels off a 34-story downtown building. I go, you want me to do what? And they go, you rappel off this building. And I go, wow, all right. So I said, all right, I'll do it. It's for a good cause, okay? So I went to the radio station. I said, hey, can you guys interview me? Good buddies of mine are the morning talk show guys. And I go, can you guys interview me so we can push this thing at least for the Highway Patrol and help out Special Olympics? They're like, absolutely. So they ran, and I asked one of them to do it with me. And he goes, man, I'm not doing that. And I go, if your listeners bring in $1,000 in the next hour for you to do it, to pay for it, to pay the fee for charity, will you do it? And he goes, absolutely. All right, I'll do it. They had the listeners had $1,000 there like right away,
right? And
so he did it with me. But I'm telling you, I was literally in my pants going over the edge of that building. I freaked out, but I did it because I was, I guess, confronting a fear too, right?
Are there any other high adrenaline type things that are on your bucket list?
I love flying small planes, love flying in small
You
planes.
have a pilot license?
Not yet. Nope. I have actually taken some lessons, but I just never had the time to finish the dang thing.
So what do you do? Go up and the guy with you says, hey, man, go ahead and take the controls.
Well, and you know what's crazy is I bought Flight Simulator X to learn how to fly at home. It's the whole computer system, right? And you got the big monitor in front of you, and you can control everything in the cockpit. You can put it on autopilot. You can set flights. You can do whatever you want to do. Everything's globally correct for runways. Flying from Heathrow to New York, I can set it on autopilot, go to sleep for 8 hours, get up and land the plane, right? Take it off autopilot and land. And so you fly everything in that from small planes all the way up to 747s, and you learn the cockpit. It's incredible stuff. So we're at the Pentagon one year, and there's I think it was an AH-8, and it's a 737 frame. So the guys that I'm with go, you want to get in there and kind of horse around with that? I go, yeah, that'd be cool. So I get in there, they sit me in the cockpit, and they go, all right, we're going to take off from San Diego, and we're going to fly to LAX. And I go, okay, cool. So we get going, and I go, what heading do I turn to, this, that? I already knew the cockpit from Flight Simulator X. So we took off from San Diego, flew over to LAX, I landed, and he goes, have you ever flown a 737? I go, no, I've done the Simulator X. He goes, you just flew this thing, dude, by yourself without me coaching you. I go, you literally can learn that way. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I've been thinking about getting my pilot license forever. Yeah, probably at least 10 years.
Yeah.
But then, I think, sometimes I'm riding around in my mule, my Kawasaki mule, just a UTV.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, you know what, this is good for me, being on the ground. The last thing I need to do is have my stupid ass behind the controls of an airplane.
You know what you got? I think the thing is, like my buddy's got a Cirrus, and it's got a parachute built into the top of the wing. If you've got an ultralight and you've got a parachute system on it, whatever, have some fun. That's ultimately what I would like to do, is fly around ultralights. I mean, that's as close as you can get to being a bird, right? Just open cockpit, just flying around.
Unless you get a gust of wind, because the ultralight, they sound cool, and I've seen so many of them that everything looks, man, that looks peaceful, it's cool, they're not going too fast. But all of a sudden, you get a gust of wind, or you're trying to land it. I've seen some people get really effed up.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I've got a good life insurance policy, right? My kids are taken care of either way.
Hey, real quickly, man, airplanes, these days, you're almost the same age as I am, and you're still traveling a whole lot.
Right.
How many days a year are you on the road?
A third of the year, basically. That's all I know. And that's, pro wrestling, how much you guys were on the road 3/4 of the year, right?
Yeah, man, all the time. But
Even more.
But you're flying a lot.
Yeah.
But these days, back in the day, because you're old enough to remember this, back in the day, man, when you go through these, the metal detector, hey, man, you pull out your change, pocket knife, put a little round dish.
Yep.
But you roll all you through, good to go, put your pocket knife back in your pocket.
Right.
These days, okay, no pocket knives, post 9/11. But my point is, these days, all these people, back in the day, you never heard about it. And it's not because of social media you're hearing about it. It's just regular news.
Right.
Back in the day, nobody would freak out on airplanes because you're 40,000 feet in the air. There's a door here, there's a door there. You stay away from those things.
Right.
And everybody's cool because you got to have two pilots up there to get this summit on the ground, and everybody wants to live. These days, you get all these idiots starting to freak out. What are your thoughts? Because, dude, I don't really care to fly commercial too much anymore because there's so many idiots out there.
Well, I think.
And that's just calling a spade a spade.
Right.
Because when you're up there, and, there's 200 or 300 people in a damn airplane, and someone freaks out and starts causing a scene, or someone's just being stupid.
Right.
I don't get it.
You're risking everybody's lives on the plane.
That doesn't sit well with me.
It's never happened where I've been on a plane, thankfully. If somebody tries to rush the cockpit door or something like that, dude, imagine what you do. You're going to put this guy down, right?
I know is a stone cold stunner, and when I hit him with it, I hope they sell it.
I'm pretty sure you're going to.
I will be proactive.
You can do some serious damage, and no, but I think it's just society in general, man. There's such a massive loss of common sense in the world today,
or etiquette, or protocol, or just manners,
just common sense.
Yes.
You're just. I see people freak out in airports and doing all this sort of stuff and things like that. And the one thing I will say, though, is as much as I fly, I've trained law enforcement and military for over 20 years, right? And I go through the same airport every time I'm leaving, Moline International Airport, and they have new TSA people come through, right? A lot of them I've grown to be friends with. I know them for years, things like that. They know me. They literally, most of them don't even worry about me, of course, because they know what I do for a living and things. But every once in a while, there's a new person, and they'll start digging through my bag, and I go, at what point do you people figure out who's friend and foe, right? I'm done with this politically correct garbage. There's a reason there's been no attacks on an El Al flight. You know, they know what they're doing with security. They do it very targeted, very specific for people who are generally prone to blow up, and they take care of it, right? But in America, we got to be politically correct, and the guy that's trained law enforcement and military for 20 years is suddenly getting searched, right? I was at LAX. I got a guy feeling my friggin' crotch. I'm looking at him going, you're enjoying that, aren't you? Right? I just want to slap him because it's stupid, right? We even have to deal with that.
We was in Cleveland, Ohio many years ago, and it's post 9/11. And so, man, we go to Monday Night Raw. Hey, man, they didn't need me on TV. And that was a surprise to me because I was having a pretty good run. So by that time, you know, I was pretty well known.
Yeah.
You knew who the bald-headed guy with the goatee was coming down to the damn airport.
Right.
So I say, go to Vince. Hey, man, I'm not on TV tonight. You guys ain't using me. You mind if I get out of here? Hell, Steve, I don't mind at all.
Right.
Hell, got me a ride to the airport, get in, heading back to San Antonio, Texas. I go through TSA. Man, they go through everything I got. And, you know, at this time, I always call myself on my podcast, Pat, a global icon and a national treasure. I hadn't reached that status yet, but I was the biggest hellraiser that the WWF ever had. People
Right.
knew who I was. I
Yeah.
didn't, like, dude, I'm not the guy you're looking for.
Right,
okay?
right. Yeah.
It was one of the times that really had me perturbed in a travel situation of what was going on, you know, just at the TSA. Because, I mean, come on, man. You know who I am.
Right.
And it's not about me trying to be a superstar. It's like I'm the last mother that's going to blow anything up.
Right.
I just want to go home.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
maybe I have a couple Crown and Cokes on the way home.
Yeah. Which could end up making you more dangerous if
Not
somebody
me.
pisses you off.
I'm copacetic, dude. I'm just along for the ride. All right, everybody, give me the go home cue. It's time to wrap up his podcast and ride off in the sunset. I want to thank Pat Miletich for coming by the crib and shooting the breeze with me for 2 hours. I talked to Pat today, and I will talk to him again on Thursdays. We loosen things up and we start telling a few stories. Highly interesting guy, a true badass, and a class act.
This has been a Podcast One production. Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at podcastone.com. That's podcastone.com.
Hey, Friday Night Lights fans! It's Not Only Football, Friday Night Lights and Beyond is an episode-by-episode discussion of the hit TV series Friday Night Lights, hosted by yours truly, Scott Porter, who played Jason Street on the show, and my two wonderful co-hosts,
me, Zach Guilford, a.k.a. Matt Saracen.
And me, Mae Whitman, a.k.a. someone who wasn't on the show but really, really loves it a lot.
We will also bring on some special guests, answer your questions, and tell you about what's going on in our lives today.
It's Not Only Football. Friday Night Lights and Beyond is available now wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose!
Yo, what's good? It's your boy, Big Brother Jake, a.k.a. Jake Warner, my government name. Check it out. I host a show called the Big Brother Jake Podcast, and I've taken my talents to the biggest and baddest platform on the planet. That's right, baby. Podcast One. My show is unique, as